In 2014, Ubisoft released a puzzle adventure game entitled Valiant Hearts: The Great War for both 7th and 8th generation consoles, as well as PC. Set during World War I, the game follows 4 characters and a dog called Walt, helping a German soldier find his way back home to his loved ones, whilst facing a series of puzzles and challenges along the way, including collecting items which offer factual information about the war. The game itself received extremely favourable reviews from critics and audiences for its approach to dealing with themes of love and loss, as well as the decision taken to enable players to learn more about what was considered the war to end all wars. Later that year, at the first Game Awards ceremony held in Las Vegas, the game would win the award for Best Narrative, beating out Bethesda's Wolfenstein: The New Order, Telltale Games' The Wolf Among Us, and Season 2 of The Walking Dead, as well as Ubisoft's own South Park: The Stick of Truth. Since then, Best Narrative has been a recurrent category at the Game Awards, with several notable winners in recent years including Uncharted 4, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Alan Wake 2. Need for Speed Unbound is one of the last games I would ever nominate for an award such as Best Narrative. In an era where racing game franchises such as Grid and F1 have turned to drafting up stories for new releases, Need for Speed is probably one of the oldest when it comes to creating them. Since the release of Underground in 2003, the series has more often than not included a plot occurring in the background, with a few notable exceptions. Now, admittedly, the writing in older entries such as Underground, Most Wanted and Carbon certainly aren't going to be winning any awards for their overall quality either. Today, one can argue that a senior police officer yelling, "Everyone!" at his associate isn't exactly a treasure trove of complex character development. It's still a great segue to the final mission, though. This is an issue which has plagued Need for Speed for a while now. Even entries such as Rivals in 2015 weren't really the pinnacle of the dialogue masterclass, but compared to what we have now...
well, speaking of that, there's a big event today. You win big. You can win a... Wait for it.
The suspense is killing me.
A car.
Oh, shit. Well, that could actually come in handy.
Maybe we were a little too harsh. I don't want this video to just be me trashing on Need for Speed Unbound for its poor dialogue and the overall quality of its writing. Rather, I want to examine what message the writers were trying to push, and then explain why these creative choices hurt the overall quality as a result. Because trust me, if you thought Payback and Heat were intolerable, you ain't seen nothing yet. Characterization matters. Do you like or dislike the person that is talking to you? Do you agree with what they are saying? Or do you want to rip their head off their shoulders and demand they shut up? That last one applies to pretty much every single character in Need for Speed Unbound. You have annoying street racers who keep commenting on your driving every 5 seconds and often making remarks which don't match the situation you're in. You have cops with the mentality of a 7-year-old who's inhaled too much candy. And then there's Tess. Look, I have nothing against her voice actor, okay, but did nobody at Criterion Games or Electronic Arts stop and ask whether she was maybe a little too annoying? Or were they still trying to fan the flames of Battlefield 2042 and discarded that concern? And that's before we get to the player character, you, the person playing the game. When Need for Speed Heat was unveiled back in 2019, developer Ghost Games published an article about the game's narrative. Here's a section relating to the player character. We wanted to return to a design that gave the player space to inhabit their own character. This is a game about personalization, after all. But we wanted to avoid the silent observer found so often in our franchise's past. We know that the player is an agent of change, and didn't believe they would be represented that way if they only ever watched as other characters spoke. We believe we found a solid balance between having the player character involved in dialogue and leaving enough space for you to feel like they belong to you. Now, having played through Heat for a total of 82 hours since I purchased the game back in August 2024, compared to 56 hours on Need for Speed Unbound, I can definitely understand what Ghost's narrative team was aiming for, and I think that they were on the whole mostly successful in achieving their goal. Interestingly, the Need for Speed wiki page actually has the transcripts for Heat's cutscenes and character dialogue during the campaign, and from reading it, you get the impression that whilst the player character isn't so much a mute follower of the events unfolding, neither are they taking over the core direction of the game's story. There are only a few cases where the player character talks for a significant amount of time, and even then it's related to the plot rather than just spouting nonsense. The only issue I have with this approach is that the bulk of the dialogue is just questions and basic one-liners that can feel a little stale at times. As a whole though, Ghost's writing team did manage to find an acceptable balance here, and I do have to congratulate them for this approach. There's room for improvement, sure, but for a first try it mostly stays immersive, and when I was playing Heat, I was still immersed. Need for Speed Unbound takes this idea and completely ruins the whole idea of immersion. Now your player character says a hell of a lot more in cutscenes and in conversations, and they didn't stop there, no. Now they have to make snide remarks about Mayor Morgan Stevenson and Holden Parker III.
This is an achievement for you, but also for the American dream. Because you know what the problem is with Germans? They have no word for Wunderkind.
They have a word for wiener, though, and a picture of you next to it.
Nobody plays a Need for Speed game to hear characters spout a politically charged opinion, especially if the person saying it is supposed to be you. And what is the point of inserting small remarks like, oh, I like my meals with a little more moral fibre? Yes, I know it offers a little bit more information about who we're playing as and their likes and dislikes, but I'm a firm believer that the protagonist in a Need for Speed game should be you, not a generic stereotype or bland cardboard cutout whose opinions may not sit with everyone who plays this game. And I haven't even talked about the NPCs yet. Tess is pretty self-explanatory, how she could have been rejected from the cast of the 2022 Saints Row reboot for being too on the nose. Rydell is fine, but there are occasions where it really does come off as either annoying, out of touch, or in particular case, insufferably shallow-minded. But more on that later. Your rivals in races are a different story. I have to give credit where it is due. Criterion's decision to allow you to see who you'll be racing against and learn a bit more about them is a neat touch. Could it have been improved? Absolutely. But it is the thought that counts. What isn't so nice is their constant commentary on your driving. Now, yes, this was a thing in Heat, but this was only limited to races and events you did during missions and not outside of them. And even then, it was not as on the nose. In some cases, it often adapted to circumstances around you, such as one drift mission which, depending on your heat level, may or may not result in you having to deal with cops.
Going after a hotshot in a Lotus Exige, I'll take him off the streets.
I don't mind a remark or two every now and then, so long as it's actually relevant to what you're doing and doesn't come off as insufferable. Something Unbound fails to do in both categories. Then we have the cops. And I'm just going to play you some footage of me in police chases in Unbound. Feel free to skip ahead if you get bored.
Patrol's joined in on pursuit of the suspect, dispatch.
All units be advised, purpose at Canmore.
Get it close. Slow this pump down.
Dispatch, we're getting our ass kicked here. Interceptor down and out.
Roadblock deployed.
It feels like Criterion took a look at the unprofessional chatter of the night cops in Heat and thought, what if we did that, but all of the time? See, the difference between day and night cops in Heat worked because the day cops were professional and the night cops were corrupt. Say what you will about the overall quality of the writing there, but it kind of worked in a way, and I don't get that same impression in Unbound. There's no evidence that the police are doing anything illegal. One thing that Need for Speed Unbound really wants to hammer into your skull is that these street racers aren't dangerous daredevils and crooked criminals endangering the lives of innocent civilians of Lakeshore. They're doing this because it is an art, and that the police should go after real criminals. And okay, I'm sorry. Who wrote this? Who the hell wrote this game's script? All right, let's have a look. Need for Speed Unbound writer, wiki. Okay. Kristen McGorry, right. And what has she worked on previously? Okay, 2 Assassin's Creed games as a scriptwriter, something to do with The Sims, and... yeah, alright, well, that's definitely worth hiring her to lead the narrative and story of a racing game, isn't it? I hate to bring this matter up because I know this is a particularly divisive statement, but hiring the wrong creatives matters. It matters that you hire people who are not only skilled in crafting narratives, but who have a good understanding of the franchise they are working on and everything associated with it. I do not care who is in charge of a game's creative direction or narrative, as long as they know what they're doing and strive to deliver the best quality possible. So, when a game starts pushing a message that is directly antithetical to the core principles and values of the series it is a part of, you, as a customer and a player, are entitled to your right to completely shit on what is in front of you if you don't like it, as long as you've actually experienced it yourself. Kristen, what was going through your mind when you were writing this game's story? That the police were the bad guys and we were the innocent ones? Because if that really is the case, then this...
I'm gonna need some backup, dispatch. Control just got taken out of the fight.
...is just self-defense. And this... is just Johnny Shithead having a bad day. This issue is something that was present in both Payback and Heat, although in both cases those particular lines only came about if you weren't driving quick enough, so there was a chance you wouldn't come across them at all. In Unbound, however...
Welcome back to KRS-FM News across the lake. The mayor confirmed rumors of a rumble in the streets last night. She has released the following statement.
I want to assure the good people of Lakeshore that I fully condemn the illegal street race that occurred last night. That is why, as of this morning, I am releasing emergency funds to the LPD, ensuring they can increase their presence throughout our city. And I say directly to those reckless individuals with wanton disregard for stop signs, stop.
Great. Looks like there's gonna be even more heat on us now.
I can't fucking even right now. Need for Speed Unbound's tradition of stirring up dialogue and conversations so lackluster and uninspired doesn't end there, for it wouldn't be a complete package without references. That's right, Instagram, Initial D, Smokey and the Bandit, Outrun, movie reboots, the list goes on. And all of which fail spectacularly at holding my interest because they are handled in such a pointlessly drab manner. Rydell often finds himself looking at stuff on Instagram and commenting on it, which I suppose is to do with the game's whole idea of making him look like an out-of-touch father figure, in which case congratulations guys, you did a great job. There's a bit about how Smokey and the Bandit is apparently being rebooted, which comes after you test drive a Pontiac Firebird, to which the protagonist asks why a reboot's a thing. And, oh my god, that's the worst offender of them all. They made a reference to Outrun with a Ferrari Testarossa and they didn't paint it red? Then again, a white Testarossa isn't that bad. Don Johnson had one in Miami Vice and that show's still popular. References in video games only work if they are subtextual and don't drag on for too long, either or. A brief reference can work, but the examples in Need for Speed Unbound feel less like the writers were genuinely interested in exploring and more interested in saying, yeah, you like that, don't you? We like it too. Does that make us cool now? And down with the dogs? Please give us more money. Please. A second issue is that references can often backfire and make the game really dated. Rydell laughing at a dog on a skateboard stopped being a thing 10 years ago, and Instagram isn't the popular hot new app it once was. Why not just make up a social media site of your own? Heat didn't really bother with references as far as I'm concerned. There was a brief bit about how the player's antics on the first night got a lot of views on social media, but after that I didn't really bother to dive any deeper, instead focusing on the story and the plot. Wait, hang on a minute, I forgot about the news cutscenes. Alright, let's take a look at those. You may not have noticed, but during these news cutscenes there are a few references and in-jokes here and there, such as this one, which is a clear reference to HBO's Chernobyl, which debuted earlier that year. These references are far and few between though, and the rest of the headlines are just satirical gags that don't really mean that much. Considering that these appear during cutscenes when your attention is mainly focused on what's being said and shown, something like this can get brushed to one side. So I can put up with Heat's references as, whilst they may be a little bit outdated, they can be ignored and aren't spoken by characters. Unlike Unbound, where you can't shut up Tess whenever she brings up whatever she's been streaming on Netflix. Okay, time for a quick plot summary. The game starts with you rebuilding a car with Yaz, you do a few races in it, that car gets stolen by some crooks who she may have a connection with, then after grinding in the Grand for a few weeks, I think it's about 3 weeks, she comes back and admits that she wasn't part of what happened. Okay, and why did you come back and tell everyone the truth, Yaz? Well, apparently it's because the player didn't come to her defense and just stayed out of arguments between her and Rydell. God. This is the kind of family drama I would have come to expect from an American teen series like Riverdale. Well done, EA, you finally managed to reach out to those audiences and push any traces of your dignity onto the train crossing, where it has now been completely destroyed. Sometimes I wonder whether these writers are actually trying to create competent characters and failing to do so, or if they're just channeling their inner self into a fictional story. Oh, and your character ends up forgiving Yaz even though she was in the wrong and deserves to be driven off Lakeshore Pier and into the cold water. Oh, and Rydell does too. Because, as Tess says, it's all about the friends we made along the... Okay. Okay. I've got room for one more point. Whilst all of this is going on, you will often hear snippets from KRS-FM, the local radio station for Lakeshore, about an upcoming mayoral election between the incumbent mayor, Morgan Stevenson, and Holden Parker III, the main rival. These two are clearly meant to be Hillary Clinton's / Joe Biden and Donald Trump's self-inserts because apparently Mayor Stevenson is a strong, powerful woman, whereas Holden Parker III hates communists, anarchists, and women. He's also down for the kids because he knows what they want, skate parks and whatnot. I do not give a shit about these characters. Putting aside the issue I just mentioned, they have absolutely no repercussions on the story whatsoever. They just pop up from time to time, make their point so painfully clear, then they disappear, and now I'm feeling furious because the player character has just commented on that entire matter. Ugh. It's the same story with Alec, Yaz's friend who was responsible for the whole incident at Rydell's place. He doesn't show up once. The only thing we hear of him at the end is how he's gone bankrupt. Right? And I've never met him. I don't know what his behaviour is like or seen a photo of the damn person. Villains only work if their presence is felt during a story. You can't expect me to care about these people or worry what they'll do to me in my ride if their only course of action is to send cops after me, most of which are stupid as hell. Again, let's go back to Heat and compare that. Both Frank Mercer and Danny Shaw aren't just caricatures, even if that is an accusation one can level against them. They do play a significant role in the story. For example, halfway through, Shaw impounds Anna's ride, leaving her without wheels for an entry race into the league. Therefore, she uses a 67 Camaro that belongs to her brother Lucas without asking him first. Shaw then returns to take her out, and we have to help disable his ride. This comes at a cost, with the Camaro being badly damaged and causing a split between Anna and her brother Lucas, because apparently it was their father's and it was passed down or something like that. Shaw isn't just a background character in Heat, he does play a fundamental role in the plot and how that affects the relationships of the good guys. It's the same story with Frank Mercer. After an incident early on in the game, Anna's friend Joe has lost his Polestar 1 to the cold sea and he's facing life in prison or something even worse. Mercer lets him walk away, but only if he leaves town for good. Not wanting to play Russian roulette again, Joe does so, much to Anna's disappointment, making way for her to approach the player with a proposition to join her new crew. Later on, Mercer takes you and Anna into custody. That results in Lucas following us and slamming the Camaro into the police unit, leaving Mercer and Lucas badly injured. And as the player drives off, the reality hits us. We need to find a new place to set up shop. The cops are watching us. We can't return home just yet. Hell, the final battle involves you taking down Mercer, who tries to escape with the BMW M3 GTR Need for Speed keeps reusing for nostalgia baiting purposes, leaving him without a functioning ride and facing a death sentence courtesy of Eva Torres. I'm not saying their execution of these examples were without their faults, but Ghost's narrative team did just enough for the story not to feel too farcical and without any major plot points. Unbound's lack of a proper villain makes the ending feel like a cheap and undeserved finale rather than the celebration and pat on the back it should be. Yes, you get your car back, but it's not like you don't have faster rides in your garage. In Heat, you were gifted the M3 GTR courtesy of The League, with which a bit of tuning could do 230 miles per hour, plus making it a hell of a better reward. Later on, they did add the Polestar 1 Hero Edition if you completed the story, but it's not as good performance-wise, so yeah, go figure. Need for Speed Unbound is meant to be a successor to Heat, considering that it is all things considered, just another entry in the modern Need for Speed era rather than a revolutionary overhaul, with similar physics, customization, car list, and so on. And while some small changes and tweaks were made to the overall experience, the weak story and dialogue really held it back from being good. At best, I would say Unbound is a bit of a mixed bag, all things considered, and in time, I think it will be looked on in the same light as Payback, a bland installment with very little to show off that actually means something. So, if you are looking for a Need for Speed game with a good story, Heats is definitely worth your time, even if it is a little too short for a £60 game. Although it's often at 90% off, so I guess that's always an option. Look, if you're a fan of Need for Speed Unbound and you don't mind the iffy story and the cringy dialogue and you're just there to drive fast cars and have a good time, then that's great. More power to you. I get that Need for Speed games aren't really about the story, all things considered. But in a world where good writing and character development is becoming an endangered species, it is disappointing that Criterion games simply couldn't deliver a competent plot and good characters, even if it may have been a while since they last tried their hand at one. Good writing doesn't take much, just determination and effort to deliver a satisfying execution. Why do you think I spent the last 20 odd minutes or so and 3,500 words putting this case study forward?